Good morning, everybody. Good morning. If you could all please take your seats, we'll get this session started this morning. So thank you all very much for joining or rejoining today's second session on addressing critical loss and damage challenges, human mobility, slow onset processes, and non-economic losses. My name is Chris Richter. I'm the Regional Migration, Environment and Climate Change Specialist from IOM's Regional Office, and I'll be your moderator for this morning's session. So today's session 2 is intentionally a little bit different from the conversation we had yesterday, for those of us who joined yesterday as well. But it's really intended to build upon the key points that were raised in that first session. So you recall that yesterday we spent time unpacking what loss and damage looks like in different contexts and different sectors, what some of the challenges are to effective responses. And we heard about some of the tools available as well and how they are already being used to address this topic as well. Today, though, we want to be a little bit more forward-looking and to think about how we can integrate loss and damage into regional, national and local practice, how we can scale up implementation, and what sort of tools or guidance can help get us there. Now, in that respect, the discussions today will directly inform upcoming WIM how-to guidance and technical guides and other sort of support materials that are currently or soon to be in development. Now, to help ground our conversation, we'll hear some key takeaways about yesterday's session from our organising partners, Sarah and O, representing the Munich Climate Insurance Initiative as a member of the technical expert group on comprehensive risk management, and Miss Angela Rivera, who one of our WIM executive committee members. But before we do that, I just wanted to draw your attention to a couple of administrative matters. First of all, on your tables, you'll see some small sheets of paper, and we'd like to ask you to please use these to write down any questions you might have about the discussions, either from yesterday or any of the presentations that will follow today. And please note on that very clearly if those questions that you have are for specific people or if they're just general questions, and we'll do our best to respond to those as the session progresses, noting that we didn't really have time for questions yesterday. The other point is that similar to yesterday, you'll see a QR code on the screen behind us, and please feel free to scan it now and to start sharing your inputs through the questions that we have for you on Mentimeter, and we'll look at the questions and responses in a little while. But with that brief introduction, let me turn to our colleagues for some reflection on yesterday's discussion. Angela, would you like to kick us off? Thank you.
Thank you so much, and good morning, everybody. It was a pleasure to be with you yesterday and also to join you once again in this second session. Perhaps just a short summary. Yesterday we had the opportunity to introduce what is the EXCOM, the Executive Committee of the Warsaw International Mechanism, as a policy technical arm that works in some kind of technical guidelines. We heard from some of you a fruitful experience in introducing these technical guidelines into your national processes. For instance, the case of Bhutan, the case of Kenya, and how these technical guidelines are supporting your work at national level. We heard, for instance, in the case of Kenya, how they took into account the comprehensive risk management compendium. So the idea today is also to elaborate more on that in terms of the products and also to understand what are your needs. Yesterday we discussed, for instance, the losses and damages that you identify in your country and that you are facing. but also the gaps that you see at national level. For instance, this kind of disconnection sometimes between the realities that are happening into the local level and the policies that you develop at national level, the issues in terms of coordination between the different ministries and entities, the financial gap in terms of how to get access to the technical assistance and financial resources. So today is also the opportunity to engage in a more deep discussion in terms of this, and also to have a better understanding in terms of the work that we have in the UNFCCC, what is the advantage to apply, for instance, to the Santiago Network, which is one of the bodies that is part of the WIM executive, WIM EXCOM, and those are perhaps the key messages that we want to bring here, to take this second session as an opportunity to resolve perhaps doubts that you have, and also to get from you some feedback in terms of future work that we expect to develop in these bodies that are really important for all of us. So with that, I give you the floor.
Thank you very much for that, Angela. I think that provides us with a nice sort of high-level overview of the discussion so far and what we'd like to get out of the discussion today. Saren, maybe over to you for any sort of reflections from your side from a more maybe technical point of view.
Yeah, thank you, Chris. And I think Angela really summarized well about yesterday's session. And what I've observed, especially during the breakout discussion, is that actually many countries are facing pretty similar challenges. For example, in enhancing the coordination among ministries and understanding loss and damage in a bit more technical context. So countries have quite limited understanding on loss and damage, especially like climate risks, and how do they access, or what methodologies are there and what interventions are there. And but at the same time, it was very encouraging for me to see as a tech CRM group that the knowledge products that we developed were actually used in a country level, which was presented by James on Kenya and UNDP on how they assess loss and damage and utilizing CRM compendium. So I think this really underscores why usability matters and why we are having today's session. So I really encourage the participants to really be open and try to share your experiences on what are the knowledge gaps are there, and like be honestly open for your understanding about comprehensive risk management in terms of loss and damage. I think that would be really support us to develop like a very practical knowledge project for this year. Thank you.
Thank you very much for that, Sarah. And I mean, maybe just some reflections from my side as well, just on some of the thematic issues we saw come up yesterday. I mean, for me, one of the key things I noticed was that the role of Indigenous communities came through very strongly, both in terms of the groups that are most impacted, but also in terms of solutions using traditional knowledge. And within that context as well, I think there was also some points related to lack of access to global frameworks and discussions and challenges in connecting national plans with local realities and responses. And also I think that the challenges of addressing non-economic losses and damages, which some people highlight as being insufficiently addressed in the discussion so far. For me, another thing, and of course I come from the UN Migration Agency, so forgive me that my ears picked up when I heard some of these discussions, but I also noticed that there were some points related to human mobility as a challenge, both in the Mentimeter that we did yesterday and also in some of the small group discussions. And this speaks, I think, to the need to better understand mobility dynamics, to integrate those issues into, adaptation planning and loss and damage responses, and to develop, concrete measures to address mobility challenges. So from a thematic point of view, those were some of the points we raised, but of course we hope to build on this conversation today. So with that, thank you very much, Angela and Saren, for that introduction, and we can turn now to the Mentimeter live poll. If you haven't scanned the code yet, please go ahead and do so, and we'll go through the questions with you. I'll give you a minute to do that. So we can start once you've all sort of logged in. We can see some of the responses that have been provided already to the first question: which WIM XCOM knowledge products are you aware of? See the technical guide on integrating human mobility and the technical guide on sea level rise as being quite prominent, actually quite even now across the board. Several of you haven't heard of any of these, and that number is growing. So it's a good opportunity for us to sort of talk a little bit more about these in the session today. Okay. Maybe we can just move to the next. Can we move to the next question, please? Okay, what type of knowledge product would be most useful for your work? For example, access to finance, data generation, integrating loss and damage, international policies, and so on. This is sort of an open response for all of you to provide any sort of inputs you might have. Access to finance, policy briefs, data. Measurement, yes. Finance is clearly a key issue here. Data generation as well. See quantifying loss and damage as well, which is also definitely a key issue that we're coming across quite frequently in different contexts. Okay. All right, I think there's a clear theme across the room here. Perhaps we can move to the next question. How do you obtain information about loss and damage tools and mechanisms, e.g. the UNFCCC website, LinkedIn, academic journals, COP, newsletters, and so on? This is another open response. Website, UNFCCC website. Yeah. That's good. I'm sure our UNFCCC colleagues are glad to know that the website is the font of all knowledge on this topic. Academic journals. Okay, interesting. Newsletters. This event. Okay, excellent. Okay, let's move to the next question. What are the top 2 to 3 barriers preventing effective action on loss and damage? So this is one where you can select all the responses that apply. Institutional coordination and access to resources seem to be quite significant there. Okay. Data availability as well, quite strong. And just to say as well that I think you can keep adding to these as we go along. So we'll certainly collect the outputs of this Mentimeter poll for future reference as we're working through the different technical guides. Okay, let's move to the next question. I think this is the last one as well. Do you have any types of loss and damage or sectors that you or your country want to prioritize? For example, agriculture, life, health, cultural heritage. Agriculture, okay. Coastal management, health, life, human mobility. Okay, thank you very much for all of these inputs. Human rights, HCHR is in the room as well. Okay, well, thank you very much. These results will keep coming in, but I think this gives us sort of a clear overview. There was definitely some common themes in response to the different questions that I think will put us in good stead to try and understand a little bit about how to manage this issue moving forward and what sort of support the WIM XCOM and its different groups can provide to this. So we'll now move to a little bit of a panel discussion with some lightning insights on what has worked in practice in terms of addressing loss and damage. So we're turning from, I guess, the needs and the risks and so on to experience. And this segment focuses on hearing some insights on what has actually worked in practice to move from assessment to action. So I'll invite our speakers to join me here on the panel. We'll start with Mr. James Tonyo, a member of the WIM XCOM, who we met yesterday as well, but to share some reflections from the Kenyan experience. We'll hear from Dr. Heng from Cambodia's Ministry of Environment and National Council for Sustainable Development. And finally, Mr. Robin Kipoi, Adaptation Officer and NAP Implementation Coordinator from Papua New Guinea, the Department of Climate Change and Development Authority. Give our panelists a warm round of applause and welcome. Thank you. Okay, so as I say, we want to sort of hear some very short insights from your different country contexts about what has worked and how you've sort of moved from assessments of loss and damage to action on the ground. Well, if you could sort of keep your interventions quite brief, I think 5 minutes maximum, if that's possible, just because of the short timeframes, and then we'll hopefully be able to respond to some questions as well, potentially. But James, I'll hand over to you to lead the way, and thank you very much for joining us again.
Yes, thank you. Thank you, moderator, and thank you everyone for joining this session. And during the Mentimeter, there is one thing that has struck me on the institutional coordination. And it's not easy. And it is so simple. If you want to get it right, you make it under the law. And that is what has made us work in Kenya, because our Climate Change Act has mandated all ministry, department, and agency to have a functional climate change units with a focal point. So then the Climate Change Director just plays a coordination role, because climate change affects all the sectors. So not only one department can work on it, because you cannot be expert of road, expert of water, expert of agriculture. So it means the technical team needs to come from the relevant agency. So one of the reasons why maybe I can talk how we are managing, like we are trying to move now from the assessment to action, and one is that what we call all of society and bottom-up coordination, and one it is through the legal framework. And one of the things that we have prioritized is what we call budget-driven methodology. So, and this is at communities that are on forefront of crisis, prioritize their own recovery needs. So when we are developing our data collection tool, so one of the question it is the community now to tell us exactly what they want. Then the technical team now, they will go on and figure how much this activity or this intervention can cost now to implement in this activity. And some of the requests from them, and this was under specialized question that you are on. And this also is a challenge for the team. If you want to do any data collection, you just create your own data collection tool that you customize within your country context. Then you do the pilot before you go to data. Then the other thing, it was on the engagement. For us, we decided deliberately to use youth as enumerators to do data collection. And this is just now to give them more insight with attachment to the experts in different sector. So when they were collecting data, the experts, they were just guiding by the youth, but through the training. And this give the trust to the community, because we draw these youth from the same community. So they were speaking the same language, and then they could relate to each other. So the multi-agency technical team, that's another thing, because we compose the team from all relevant agencies, including academia, to provide their technical capacity in terms of the research. You have the civil society, who now they are giving us a perspective on how they're engaging with the community. Then now we have the government leads, because at the end of the day, they are the one who they are going to take now the full responsibility. What happened from our side? Relevant ministry must take the responsibility if anything goes wrong. So you must now be part of the team. So in terms of the synergy between the international mechanism, what we tried to avoid, it's the silo mentality. And in this one, Kenya avoided institutional silo by ensuring it different international requests were mutually reinforcing. And what we have done in this, we have used the Santiago network and technical assistance just to get more of the data. And now the fund, now to give them more for the funding. And here the Santiago network and technical assistance request, we have requested them to model the projection up to 2035, and this is to design the supplement of the implementation of the fund. So once we get the fund already, we have the report from the technical assessment that say this is what Kenya will experience up to 2035. So this will give more of the data that is required by the fund. So of the proof of loss, so the technical modeling from the technical assistance from Santiago network, it will provide the proof of loss, because we have requested them now also to do the assessment since 10 years ago up to 2035. So this also will provide us another evidence to the fund. This is what, apart from our own assessment, then the Santiago network will give another confirmation of what you have said if the fund needs more of that. So on the robust data collection and refining, I've talked about it. You need to customize your own tool, to have your own tool, and then you use your own people to collect the tool. When it comes to data, there is what we call intersectionality, and this now we are collecting data in terms of the sex, age, disability, and this is something of the things that you have customized because we want to address some of the non-economic losses, such as a unique health risk faced by displaced women. So there was specific question that was reflecting on the women, or those who have been displaced, and what they are going through. When it comes to legal and statutory mainstreaming, I've said all this in our Climate Change Act. All loss and damage efforts are anchored in National Climate Change Act and our updated NDC, which has mandated the mobilization of the finance to protect the vulnerable sector. So it is still anchored, and that's when you check on the template, there is where you are supposed now to qualify on terms of the linkage with the existing policies. So on the institution, so it's only one institution that climate change just plays a coordination role, but the other sectors now takes the lead. So on operationalization, when it comes now the technical paper on non-economic losses, so in this one, Kenya moved beyond physical damage to quantify the psychological trauma. So in this, it gives a lot of nails and nails information. So you can use it now to create your own intervention when it comes now to specific issues and also loss of cultural and identity. So on the human mobility, the guide is so clear on the same. And now because we are proposing to have a wrap, because displacement currently is the major issue. Those who have been affected, as I said yesterday, they have been affected permanently. They will not go back to those areas, and we are using the technical guide on human mobility on how now we can be able to propose a good wrap intervention. Those are resettlement action plans, and also how we are going to treat the displaced central in terms of the central governance, and rather as a humanitarian products. So we may want to make this as a. There is also what I've talked, a whole government and bottom-up approach that is working, and in terms of the risk, so we are talking about the predictive mapping, and here we are trying to get the highest watermark, and this is one of the, as documented, that talks about the issue of the risk. So we want to avoid some of the risk. So maybe the last, so creating synergies between the two. So, and the Santiago, as a provider advanced modeling, there is what we call because we are looking for this capital grant, and you want to go to the highest. So you need to have data as more as possible to avoid being back and forth. And the only one is to make the three. So we are using the WIMEXCOM products as our science evidence. We will use the Santiago network, the assessment report, as also another evidence that Kenya is going through this. And then I will now present this to the fund, to fund what was already has been provided for.
Great. Thank you very much for that, James. And I think that sort of tracks with some of the points we saw on the Mentimeter earlier about, the need for data and so on. But also the siloed, or the issue of siloed approaches is something that from the IOM side we hear from our government counterparts all the time as well. So we've heard the point of view from Africa. It'd be interesting to hear of any similarities or differences with Southeast Asia. So Dr. Heng, over to you from the Cambodia perspective.
Thank you. Good morning, everybody. And first of all, I would like to thank UNSCC Secretariat and host country Korean government and invite me to share the loss and damage working in Cambodia. And real word loss and damage and related to the adaptation that I focus on adaptation that based on the UNSCC loss and damage and work program and also international mechanism that during COP27 and 28 that and raise the point that important focus on this how to work that important and for the addressing the climate related to the damage vulnerability country like Cambodia that and for the fund for responding of this one and focus area for the slow onset event and like sea level rise and flood and drought and so on. The vulnerability community is important and also risk management focus on. And experience Cambodia how the vulnerability to climate change that based on the low capacity and address to climate change and still so far and we have experienced loss and damage and since the Katsina 2011 I think that's strong and flooded and we also conduct the loss and damage based on this economic assessment and nearly 70% of the commune and suffered by the province and all this nearly the 300 commune then affected. And how the El Nino La Nina so far this year and the El Nino is very hot and last 2 weeks and very hot in Cambodia. Experience Cambodia and the loss and damage and we found some this 2011, 2020 and 2025 last year and strong and also this flood and suffered by the flood in the country nearly 14 provinces in the country and affected by the people around 1 million that are suffered by the flooded one and how so far and country and also the affected by the flood La Nina and this year and also this hot like the rice damage for agriculture is important for this agriculture and nearly the 7,000 hectares affected. But some is one institution and recover by the respond to drought season and has been the right successful saving that. How to work in the practice climate change impact of economic growth by the flood and drought. We conduct assessment in since 2019 and cooperate with the Ministry of Economy and Finance. And for the GDP growth, what with the climate change and without climate change, how much impact by the GDP growth? If without climate change, nearly 10% of the GDP growth by 2050 and focus on the loss of income and also reduction of the labor productivity and also damage to asset This we three area, and we focus on this. We based on the using climate economic growth impact model. This we use for the country, and we also projection by 2050, and like align with the carbon neutrality. How we need to respond? We need to the key GZF support proposal for the country, like some of the project like fund for the responding loss and damage. We have approved by GZF and 2025 and cooperate with the UNICEF and work together for this proposal. Then. And one more for the long-term program and access NDC for implementation in the country, like the Cambodia Climate Change Finance Facility in 2024, and we also this approved by GZF then. And important how to implementation and subnational level, like the local government and climate change, and nearly 10 million, then small, but for country and the big money. That's one, how to respond to subnational level, that loss and damage in country, focus on the developing the capacity and to create proposal target the loss and damage caused by the climate change and using for the vulnerability assessment then. And key sector area for the value chain, agriculture, forest conservation, coastal zone protection, and building resilience in the local government. These area, some of the projects that we use for the country. One more project for implementation so far for agriculture, Ministry of Agriculture, Forestry and Fishery, that climate-friendly agribusiness value chain and with the ADB, and we work together this crop loss and infrastructure damage. How to respond, and we have some is policy and strategy respond, and some is we have Cambodia Climate Change Strategy Plan, and also the national determined contribution in this issue, and long-term strategy, and so on is for the respond the climate change then. And policy lesson learned for the one model for the PPCR project, and we have like investment and nearly 100 million and for 5 years, and respond for the sea sector, agriculture, water resource and infrastructure. This is important for this one. And I will end. And some is for adaptation, and we cover for how much the big money in proposal based on the NDC 2, and for adaptation the 2 billion, and NDC 3 for multiple 3 times for the implementation budget need. Thank you very much for your attention there.
Thank you very much for that. Round of applause, everybody. I think one of the sort of key messages that I've taken from this, and it's sort of similar to what James had mentioned earlier, is the very structured approach that a lot of governments are taking to this issue in terms of trying to undertake sort of risk and needs assessments, building the findings of those into their key planning documents, including NAPs and NDCs, and then using that as well to sort of build support around trying to access support from whether it's the Santiago network or the GCF or the FRLD and so on. So thank you very much for that intervention, Dr. Heng. So we're moving from Africa to Southeast Asia now to the Pacific. Over to you for your insights, please. Thank you.
Thank you so much, moderator. And once again, good day, everyone. Let me just quickly introduce myself, and I'll just give a quick rundown of what PNG do in terms of looking into policies and projects in terms of addressing climate change, adaptation, and loss and damage in PNG. So my name is Ruben, and I work with the Climate Change and Development Authority. Our mandate is to provide coordination and oversee all sectors and also private sector NGOs who are working on this space. And also we function as an NDA as well. So in terms of coordinating GCA projects and other climate finance projects. Yeah, so basically as a NAP coordinator, I just want to quickly update some activities or actions that we are undertaking in PNG. As we all know, like loss and damage is rapidly gaining traction globally as an innovative financial mechanism, given the increased frequency and severity of climate events. It recognizes that communities require more than just adaptation measures to support their resilience or recovery and rebuilding efforts. So with that, in PNG, mostly like the loss and damage is a bit new. So it's like new topic for us. So in the previously, we have been addressing these issues looking in the adaptation space. So what we did was in terms of policy-wise, our focus was to mainstream and integrate climate change adaptation actions into the existing plans and policy at the national level down to the sub-national level, which is the province. So Papua New Guinea, we have 22 provinces, and it's a bigger landmass, about 15 plus million population. So we have the coastal and we have the atoll and island communities, and also the highlands. So within our NAP, we have the government of Papua New Guinea, we prioritize 9 priorities. So which one of them is the climate-induced migration. And as you might view some of our stories in the social media and other mainstream medias, that we have lot of climate refugees. One in Boca, they call it Bougainville. That's Carteret Island. When you Google it, you will see that information. And also there are 3 other provinces which, with the support of our UN agencies like IOM, UNDP, they're supporting us to come up with climate mobility policy. So currently we are doing that. So yeah, so we, in terms of the 9 priorities, which we are not implementing those. For instance, malaria and vector-borne is one of our priority. So we work with the health sector. So health sector implement those priorities. Also, other priorities like food security and cities and climates, and the 9 priorities that which is reflected in the NAP. So our main focus is to mainstream and integrate all this into the main system. Why? Because we want to inform our decision makers that currently we don't have a dedicated pool of funds that will address this under our current budget of the government. They call it the recurrent budget. So we want to make sure we inform our decision makers so that we can create a basket that will be a basket or a pool of fund that is ready for the rainy days in terms of preparedness and response. So that's I want to just highlight us on the policy-wise. But coming back to the projects, we have existing projects. Let me just highlight one. We have a building resilience of climate change. That's a big project, multi-million project that is managed by ADB. So the more focused, the targeted areas is the coastal and island atoll communities. So in that project, we built a climate resilient wharf. It's successful. We've launched it back then, 2 years ago. And then we gave them the boats, built them the community halls and other services like that. So that's what we've been doing. And also in terms of addressing the human mobility and other thematic areas under the laws and damages. So I think some of the work we have been done during executing some of our activities under adaptation. But now since loss and damage come, I think we should tick off some of the boxes that now we're undertaking, like the policy, like the tools, vulnerable assessment toolkits. We want to regulate them, regulate this toolkit and make it more operationalized so that it can be one of the standards that the country will follow in terms of applying for projects within our internal systems. So I just want to highlight a few things. So thank you.
Great, thank you very much for that, and thank you to all our presenters for your insights. I mean, I think this last point that you were highlighting about the 9 priorities you have in your NAP and is being implemented by different sectors across the country. That's right, yeah, which I think also speaks to what James had said earlier about whole of government, whole of society approaches as well. Thank you again. I just want to maybe just take a minute just to see if there are any questions or comments from the floor, actually, at this point. There's maybe one at the back. Maybe not. Okay, if that's the case, I mean, as we mentioned at the outset, you can feel free to write any questions you might have down on the little bits of paper on your desk, and we'll try and address those as well as we go along. But thank you again to our panelists, and yeah, thanks for your insights. We'll move to the next session. Okay, so we just heard a little bit from countries about what implementation is looking like currently in practice in their different contexts. But this next segment is really about trying to connect those experiences to the WIM XCOM's mandate and to the support materials currently in the pipeline and being developed by the different task forces and groups under the WIM XCOM. So we'll start by reflecting on how WIM's mandate aligns with country implementation needs and where there are opportunities to strengthen that connection. And then we'll hear about other support materials and guidance that has been produced or is under developed by the WIM XCOM currently. So to help us do that, we'll hear again from Angela Rivera, who we met earlier, as well as Seren O from MCII, if you could please join. And I'll also provide a little bit of an update from the perspective of the Task Force on Displacement in terms of some of the products that group has been working on. But Angela, if you're ready to go, I'll hand over to you. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much. Just to introduce once again myself, my name is Angela Rivera. I'm XCOM representative from the GRULAC, Latin American and Caribbean region. And I've been part of this international negotiation since 2017. So just let me start saying that I will give you a concise overview of the Warsaw International Mechanism, the WIM, and in particular how its 2 arms, the Executive Committee and the Santiago Network, support countries in a complementary manner. I also want to highlight the range of experts and communities of practice that we convene through our thematic expert groups. They bridge global policy with action on the ground. We know that the adverse effects, in particular the adverse effects of climate change, are intensifying. We discussed yesterday that you are facing different types of effects of climate change. We know that we have both rapid onset events such as floods, cyclones, slow onset processes like sea level rise, desertification, and glacial retreat are generating impacts that exceed the capacity of ecosystems and communities to cope and adapt. loss of life, some of you mentioned, destroy infrastructure and livelihoods, displacement, and impacts on health and cultural heritage are becoming more and more frequent and more widespread, particularly affecting vulnerable people in developing countries. Recognizing the growing challenge, the UNFCCC established the Warsaw International Mechanism in 2013 to support developing countries that are particularly vulnerable in addressing loss and damage associated with climate change impacts. As I mentioned yesterday, and just to recap, the WIM has 3 core functions. The first is enhancing knowledge, so that's why we produce this kind of technical guidelines with the aim to provide understanding and comprehensive risk management approaches. The second function is in relation to strengthen dialogue, coordination, and synergies among stakeholders, and that's why we also have expert groups. And the third function is in terms of enhancing action and support, which is in relation of finance, technology, and capacity building. The Warsaw International Mechanism on Loss and Damage comprised 2 distinct yet complementary institutional arrangements. We have the Executive Committee, which is called the EXCOM, that I'm representing here together with my fellow colleague from Kenya, and the Santiago Network are the 2 distinct yet complementary components of the Warsaw International Mechanism on Loss and Damage, the WIM, with former serving at its policy and knowledge pillar, while the later was established at its technical assistance facility, which is the Santiago Network. The WIM, with its policing arm and the technical assistance facility, helps countries facing avoidable and irreversible impacts and guide collective understanding of loss and damage across the international system. And technical guides under the WIM turn complex climate risk into clear, practical guidance and policymakers can use. And this knowledge base helps countries to understand cascading impacts, irreversible thresholds, and multi-hazard risk, and anticipate losses, manage risk, and connect to technical and financial support. Over the past year alone, the EXCOM has produced a range of knowledge products and technical guides addressing human mobility, sea level rise, comprehensive risk management, loss of biodiversity and ecosystem services, loss of territory, loss of cultural heritage, and accessing finance to address displacement. These products are not just reports, which is important to highlight. These products are tools to support implementation and action on the ground. There are 6 modalities that you see on the screen, which the WIM implement its functions. As you see on the screen, there are facilitating support to action to address loss and damage, improving coordination among existing UNFCCC bodies, convening experts and stakeholders, promoting the development and synthesis of relevant information, providing technical guidance, and making recommendations on how to enhance engagement and coherence. These modalities underpin work under the EXCOM and the Santiago Network. The 5 thematic expert groups that I mentioned yesterday, but I will mention again, provide the technical backstopping that enables the EXCOM to co-create knowledge products and undertake activities that connect global policy discussion with needs and experiences on the ground. This graphic on the screen illustrates the remarkable breadth of expertise that the 5 expert groups bring together. At the center, you see the 5 thematic expert groups that I introduced yesterday, and we have some representatives here, like IOM, CRM expert groups. We have a 5 expert group, one of them on slow onset events. We have another one on non-economic losses. The third one is on comprehensive risk management. We have another one on displacement. And the last one, that the last expert group that was created was in terms of action and support that responds to the third function of the web. Around them, you can see the disciplines they draw on for climate science, disaster risks, management and adaptation to humanitarian affairs, health, social justice, indigenous peoples, knowledge, ecosystems and biodiversity, insurance, finance, technology, capacity building, and many more. An important point here is there are many organizations that serve as members of these expert groups are also working under the Santiago Network, which is the technical assistance arm. This overlap reinforces coherence across the loss and damage architecture and ensures that the knowledge produced under the EXCOM is directly relevant to the technical assistance that the Santiago Network catalyzes. This is an important slide also because we didn't have the opportunity to discuss that yesterday, but just to introduce that the Santiago Network catalyzes technical assistance from organizations, bodies, networks, and experts. We know that we use many acronyms, but it's important to know them, OVNEs. And these OVNEs came from developing countries, vulnerable communities for averting, minimizing, and addressing climate-induced loss and damage. And this slide shows some indicative types of technical assistance that is available under the Santiago Network, including in areas of data analysis. Some of you mentioned that there is a gap in your countries in terms of how to generate data. So this is a huge opportunity that you start applying to the Santiago Network that can help you to generate that data. And planning and finance and capacity building. The Santiago Network can also help you in terms of how to generate information, create capacity at national level to start working in loss and damage. Just to highlight, the Santiago Network is not a fund. It's just a technical arm that provides technical assistance, which is a key difference with the loss and damage fund. On complementarity of the EXCOM and the Santiago Network, which is this slide, there are several areas of complementarity between the EXCOM and the Santiago Network. And let me highlight 5 of such areas. The first one is in terms of strengthening national and local capacity. Through analytical and policy guidance from the EXCOM combined with targeted technical assistance delivered via the Santiago Network. The second one is in terms of enhancing access to technology support by linking the EXCOM knowledge outputs with the Santiago Network's operational network of technical assistance providers. The third one is improving data analytics and risk information, where the EXCOM advances methodologies, knowledge products, and gap analysis, while the Santiago Network facilitates their application through in-country technical support. So there are a lot of methodologies, or perhaps not a lot, but we know some methodologies, and if you want to implement those, we have, for instance, in the EXCOM products that collect information on the existing methodologies. So the products of the EXCOM are really useful in the sense that provides the information that you need, and then you have the Santiago Network that can help you to implement those methodologies. The fourth one is advancing implementation and effective response measures with the EXCOM analytical and policy work informing the Santiago Network's hands-on instance to translate recommended approaches into tailored solutions. And the fifth one, the last one that I want to highlight is strengthening capacity to access and utilize finance. With the EXCOM identifying strategic needs, options and barriers, and the Santiago Network catalyzing technical assistance to prepare funding requests and proposals. The Santiago Network can also help you to prepare funding proposals to the Loss and Damage Fund, for instance. The purpose of this session is to think about how we connect the WIMS mandate, the Warsaw International Mechanism mandate, to country implementation needs, and to look at what implementation support materials the expert group have in the pipeline to help do exactly that. I hope that this presentation helped in orienting what the Warsaw International Mechanism for Loss and Damage is about, the complementarity roles of the EXCOM and the Santiago Network, and the breadth of experience that we bring to this work. And I look forward, of course, to continue to respond to the needs and concerns of developing countries that are particularly vulnerable to the adverse effects of climate change, and help countries to translate loss and damage knowledge into national and sectoral policies, programming, and project development, which is one of the priorities that you have been highlighting during this session. Thank you so much.
Thank you very much, Angela. And I think that's a very comprehensive and helpful overview of the sort of infrastructure in the loss and damage space. Given what we heard yesterday about some people not being as familiar with these sort of structures, we saw today as well, people maybe aren't as familiar with some of the products that are out there. And even from Robin on the previous panel highlighting that from the government perspective in PNG, this issue is still quite a new topic. So I think it's worthwhile revisiting some of these sort of detailed background on the different bodies that exist at the national level and the sort of support that can be provided to help countries navigate this. So our next speaker on the panel is Ms. Seren O from the MCII, who's representing the Technical Expert Group on Comprehensive Risk Management. Seren, over to you, please. Thank you.
Thank you, Chris. Good morning, everyone. My name is Seren O, and I represent Munich Climate Insurance Initiative, MCII, as a member of Technical Group of Comprehensive Risk Management. So as CRM group is one of the thematic expert group that Angela just described as a function of EXCOM. And one of those functions and actions that WIM EXCOM is delivering is knowledge products. So I think in this session, I will give you a bit more examples and details about how expert group is developing knowledge product and what we are preparing for this year. So last year, we developed the second volume of CRM Compendium, and that brings together all the emerging practices on how countries are actually responding to loss and damage across the full spectrum of risk management. And this year, building on the compendium that we developed, we are trying to further develop a new how-to series of knowledge products. And here we are focusing on translating this knowledge into something more practical and usable. So today I will briefly walk you through what we have developed and learned so far and where the key gaps remain. And most importantly, what input we need from all the participants here and for the upcoming knowledge product. So let me start by referring to the TechCRM's knowledge product from last year, which is the CRM Compendium Volume 2. MCII published the second volume compendium on comprehensive risk management last year, and it synthesized inputs from the countries and the experts. So in the compendium, we introduced two important concepts, which is loss and damage signature and C2RM framework. So the first is the loss and damage signatures. It's a way of characterizing and grouping specific types of loss and damage to make them more applicable in terms of risk management and in terms of comprehensive climate loss and damage. And these are not abstract concepts, but we captured economic and non-economic impact. And also we included both rapid and slow onset hazard events. And we also considered this can be representative in a global level and not specifically towards a specific region or sector. And the second concept is C2RM framework, which is the comprehensive risk and response management framework. So this lays out how CRM interventions such as risk retention, risk transfer, or risk assessment can work together as a more coherent national system, which I will highlight in the upcoming knowledge product as well. And so basically this compendium works as a foundation of our coming knowledge product, and also provides strong background information to build upon for the upcoming knowledge product. Next slide, please. So in preparing this next phase of work, we looked at actually what countries are struggling with in operationalizing loss and damage. So for example, access to the fund for responding to loss and damage, or accessing to the technical assistance of Santiago Network, or any other relevant loss and damage interventions. So separate gaps come up consistently, and many of them are already covered in the yesterday's session, and also all the Mentimental research and presentations from previous speakers. First, there's a lack of guidance and inspiration to integrate loss and damage into national governance system. I think this is one of the challenges that many countries and many participants mentioned, also mentioned by Kenya and Papua New Guinea representative. The countries are actually really struggling to integrate loss and damage element into their governance, for example, like NDC or BTR, and also their national loss and damage framework. So this would be the major challenge that we identified. And related to this, countries are also facing challenges simply in articulating and building rationale of loss and damage, because I think Ruben mentioned that loss and damage is a new theme compared to adaptation or mitigation. So for the government or ministry's perspective, it's very tricky to build a new rationale for access to get fund or support from for loss and damage interventions. And before the country can plan a response, they actually have to be able to describe the problem in terms of loss and damage, not adaptation or not mitigation. And secondly, the CRM framework is strong and powerful in some sense, but operationalizing it is actually still remain difficult, and it might sound quite broad or too difficult for the countries to actually apply this framework. It might sound like theoretical terms. So risk assessment or risk reduction, risk retention need to work together, and the countries really need to sit in the same table, including all the relevant line ministry and also DRR agencies. And this also have to entail the budget processes and different planning cycles, and operationalizing this into real policy and real government activities is still very challenging and also underestimated. And I also want to add that there's no currently agreed definition or unified version of what actually comprehensive risk management is. Even if we develop C2RM framework, there's every country has different understanding or interpretation of CRM. And thirdly, the link between planning, implementation, and finance is very weak. So countries can identify what they need, but actually they struggle to translate this into kind of structured or financeable proposals that the FILD or Santiago Network can require. And lastly, and I think this runs through everything I've heard today and yesterday, what works needs to be bottom-up and country-led approach, and also community inclusive. So I think the knowledge products we develop need to be tools that countries shape and own, instead of inserting some information in the specific template. So this is exactly where the How to series come in. So this year we're working on the next knowledge product, which is the How to series on translating C2RM into practical steps for the countries, and to build a bit more effective national and sectoral planning processes. So the focus is identifying the steps a country needs to take to incorporate C2RM into planning, and then link to that planning and to implement and also to finance. So actually this work is in progress. We have the analytical foundation from the compendium, and we have sensed a clear understanding of the gaps, although it's ongoing. And what we need is from the countries and the experts and the relevant actors on the ground, so that including people in this room, that your experience on what exactly this breaks down into practice level. Can we move on to the next slide, please? So in preparing for the next phase of our work, we really want to ask this kind of main questions. So how should the knowledge products should be look like in a useful way? Because we don't want to generate a knowledge product which is not pragmatic for the countries in operationalizing loss and damage. And also, if you have applied some frameworks or some elements in the compendium that we developed last year, so what was your gap that you experienced, and what was the most tricky part in terms of applying to the real policy or national planning level? And how relevant this concept is for operationalizing work in the FRLD and Santiago network, because this year is very critical in terms of operationalizing loss and damage, because both the fund and the Santiago network is being operationalized. And last but not least, what would be easy or implementable steps for the country to actually start action on the C2RM, and also to comprehensively manage their loss and damage risk and climate risk for their national context. This is the questions that I wanted to raise during the upcoming World Cafe and the session, and I will hand over to Chris.
Great, thank you very much for that, Seren. And it's always good to know actually what some of the other technical expert groups have been and working on. And I think some of the issues you've highlighted have sort of tracked with some of the comments that other panelists have provided this morning as well. If I can put on my speaker hat for a moment, just in terms of the work of the Task Force on Displacement, I just wanted to very briefly highlight that we do have a couple of knowledge products already, that some of which Angela had mentioned earlier this morning, that address the issue of human mobility, including migration, displacement, and planned relocation. We touched on these a little bit yesterday as well, so I won't spend too much time on them, and also we're sort of running a little bit short on time. But just to note that one of the first knowledge products developed by the Task Force on Displacement was the technical guide on integrating human mobility and climate change linkages into relevant climate change planning processes. It's a bit of a mouthful, but in short, this technical guide is really focused on supporting governments and stakeholders to integrate human mobility issues into national adaptation plans, but also other similar frameworks at the national or local levels, which I think also speaks to some of the challenges that Seren was just highlighting in terms of governments being able to translate those sorts of climate risks and hazards and so on into these sorts of policies and frameworks. And we see this as being an important endeavour, because as we heard yesterday, the adverse impacts of climate change are having very significant impacts on the movement of people, whether in terms of disaster displacement or migration due to slow onset processes. And governments do need to, have both an understanding of those dynamics and also plans to address them in different ways. And so since around 2021, from the IOM side, we've provided support to at least 31 different countries across different regions based on the guidance in the technical guide. one point I did want to highlight here is that, the nature of that support has varied quite considerably from place to place and has included things like technical briefings, capacity development, research and data analytics, national and local level consultations, policy advice, as well as more specific technical written input to NAP or NAP-related documents and so on. So I guess the point here that I'm trying to make is that these technical guides and the support provided through them can be very flexible depending on the needs and capacities in particular places. So it's not a one-size-fits-all approach, which I think is an important consideration to remember. Now, the second technical guide is that on accessing finance to avert, minimize and address displacement, which I spoke about yesterday in the context of the Philippines. Now, the core of this document is really, I think, the comprehensive approach it details in terms of how to address displacement. So, for example, it outlines six principal areas or domains of action covering measures to address drivers of displacement, so the underlying factors that can cause displacement, to prepare for displacement, to respond to displacement when it happens, to provide durable solutions for those who are displaced, to promote safe migration as a possible adaptation strategy, noting that, sometimes taking people out of harm's way before disasters strike can be a good adaptive solution in the right circumstances, and also measures to implement planned relocation. Now, the guide provides some detail and examples of the types of interventions that can be implemented to support these sorts of outcomes in a very structured way. So I think that could be quite helpful for any practitioners who are sort of thinking through these issues and to sort of help them to better understand and potential options that can be used to respond to these sorts of climate and mobility issues. Now, this next slide shows the pipeline of programs that I spoke about yesterday from the Climate Mobility Investment Plan in the Philippines, but I think it's worth just sort of seeing this visually to get a sense of the type of programs that the process has been able to develop based on the guidance in the technical guide. And one other point that I want to note here is that in addition to utilising the technical guide on accessing finance to address displacement, the Philippines is also one of the countries that I referred to earlier where IOM has provided technical support based on our experience with the technical guide on mainstreaming human mobility. So these guides do complement each other and can be used in tandem to sort of reach these sorts of outcomes that we see here. And as I mentioned yesterday, these are now also being considered by the government of the Philippines in terms of potential access to the Fund for Responding to Loss and Damage. So you can see that, as we sort of heard from the previous panel as well, how governments can take a very structured approach to engaging with these sorts of processes using the materials outlined in the different WIM XCOM technical guides. Almost out of time, I think. But just looking forward in terms of the upcoming guides that are being prepared, the TFD is now also working on a technical guide on averting, minimising and addressing non-economic losses in the context of human mobility. And this will provide some tools to parties and other stakeholders to address issues including impacts on Indigenous and local knowledge, societal identity and cultural heritage related to human mobility and things like that. And we did hear yesterday from quite a few people regarding the importance of these sorts of issues in the loss and damage context. So this guide will hopefully provide some important insights on how to address those very specific types of challenges. Now, the guide does draw on a literature review and collected case studies from different countries and local authorities, from policymakers, from communities. So it does draw upon a wealth of existing knowledge and experience that is out there, which is very helpful. And development of the technical guide, as I mentioned, is being taken forward by the task force on displacement, including IOM and UNHCR and other partners, as well as the expert group on non-economic losses, including from the University of Liège and the Organization of Eastern Caribbean States. So getting some good interlinkages between the different technical working groups. So in terms of when we hope to see this, a final draft is expected to be produced by August, and the aim is to secure endorsement by XCOM at the, I think the 25th board meeting, which is in, September, October or something like that, I think. So stay tuned for that. That will be coming out very soon. So that's the end of my presentation. I'll put my moderator hat back on, and this is the end of the session as well. So thank you to Seren and Angela for your inputs. And in the next session, we'll be moving to sort of more of a engagement with all of you through a World Cafe style approach. But first of all, thanks to Seren and Angela for your presentations. Okay, so as I just mentioned, we'll now move on to a World Cafe session of this event, and this will sort of be the main consultative component which will directly inform future WIM how-to guides and other technical products, including those under the technical working groups that Angela highlighted earlier. So how this is going to work is as follows. You'll see around the room that there are 4 different thematic stations around the room with a facilitator and a set of specific guiding questions. And when I give you the signal, I'll ask each of you to stand up from your seats and to move to a thematic station of your choice. You can choose a thematic topic that you have particularly strong opinions about or think you could contribute to, or even one that you're just sort of interested in hearing a little bit more about and would like to hear from others. So you'll spend about 10 minutes at your station of choice where we'd like to hear your reflections and insights on the different guiding questions that will be presented to you. And after 10 minutes, you'll be asked to move to a second thematic station. So, with the idea that you can build on what others have already shared before you. So in total, you should visit at least 2 of these different thematic stations. So you can see on the screen here the topics for the 4 thematic stations on the screen. I'll give you a minute to look at those and to choose which of the 2 stations you'd like to contribute to. But the first is about embedding loss and damage into national planning and using UNFCCC mechanisms. In other words, how can loss and damage be integrated into different national and local plans and frameworks, and what sort of support our country's hoping to request to do that? I think that sort of speaks to what Seren mentioned in terms of one of the challenges. The second is on applying a comprehensive risk management approach and discussing some of the challenges related to that. The third is on priority topics and measurement gaps for future WIM products. So in other words, what sort of topics do practitioners need more support on, and what should the WIM be providing guidance on? And the fourth and final is a more general topic on the types of knowledge products that are most useful for governments and organisations and what those could look like. So those are your choices, and I will now ask you to stand and to move to one of the stations of your choice, and we'll have 10 minutes from then on to discuss with your groups. Please go ahead. Thank you. And I guess we should also say which group is which. So number 1 is over there, number 2, number 3 with Angela, number 4 in the back. Don't be shy, everybody. It's the chance to give us all your opinions.
둘, 셋. 하나, 둘, 하나, 둘, 셋, 셋, 하나, 둘.
2 more minutes, moderators. All right, everyone. Moderators, I see there's some good conversations happening, but it's time to move to the second table. No. Okay. So just a reminder, Station 1, embedding loss and damage into national plans. Station 2, comprehensive risk management. Station 3, priority topics and measures. And Station 4, knowledge products. 5 more minutes on this round, moderators. One minute. All right, moderators, if we could sort of conclude your conversations now, thanks. All right, everyone, if you could please, I see there's a few conversations going on, but if you could please return to your seats so we can continue the session. Thank you. Okay, thank you very much. Can I get the signal from the moderators that you're all ready to go for a bit of a wrap up? Yes? All right. Thank you very much, everyone, for your engagement in this, what do we call it? World Cafe session. So we'll just finalize this part of the meeting with a little bit of a report back on your discussions from each of the moderators. So I'll start with Sion at Station 1 on embedding loss and damage into national planning processes. Sion, over to you.
So from Station 1, we were trying to find, discussing mainly entry points where we see in national strategies, whether it's or documents, whether it's BTR, national adaptation plans, NDCs, etc., where there are entry points to integrate better loss and damage. So we heard very good entry points like Mauritius, they're also updating their NAPs this year. Chad as well, they're revising their NDCs and NAPs. Nepal, it was good to hear that already in their NDCs, loss and damage is well integrated, and especially in their NAPs as well, there are more than 94 references to loss and damage. Nepal made a very good point that it should be better integrated into BTR as well in terms of reporting, so better monitoring of actually how any actions related to loss and damage are being implemented. India also, the NAP is under development. And I think Cambodia also made a very good point that there are many different national strategies, but they all need to be better aligned on loss and damage. And then a lot of countries, it's interesting to hear, they are going to try to access the FLRD, so Kenya, Laos, Kenya, Laos, I think India as well. They're all in the moment preparing their concept notes for proposals for FLRD. In terms of some of the needs, immediate plans to access the SN or FLRD, there are capacity building needs in terms of technical guides, especially on finance aspects or also risk management aspects, but also interestingly, both on economic losses and non-economic losses, how to better measure that. So I'll stop here.
Great, thank you very much for that feedback, and thanks for everyone who contributed to that group. Saren, over to you for Group 2, please.
Yeah, the Station 2 was applying comprehensive risk management approach, and I think the many countries we commented on the lack of data and the lack of technical capacity on accessing data, and also lack of data repository, which is specifically capturing loss and damage relevant data. And also quantification was a big challenge. And lack of baseline data was also one of the example. And there are other two big points. One is the limited finance, which is hindering the implementation of applying comprehensive risk management. And lastly, there was many mentioning on coordination, like limited coordination among the government agencies. I think all the countries, Togo, Laos, PNG, all mentioned this element. And also lastly, it has to be not project-based, but very pragmatic approach. And also including the monitoring and evaluation so that it can make a bit long-standing results. Yeah, I'll stop here.
Great, thank you very much. Group 3.
Me.
Oh, okay, Angela, please go ahead.
Well, my group was in charge of the priority topics and measures and gaps for products in the WIM. So the first question was in relation to the 3 topics for future WIM products. And the main, I have to say, all people was voting for methodologies for quantifying loss and damage, including non-economic losses. That was the main priority that everybody raised. Also, how to integrate loss and damage in planning processes and policies, and how to get access to the existing funds. And some participants highlight that people is applying or countries are applying for the FRLD, but not for the Santiago Network because they need to understand how to apply. So they are looking forward to see some kind of guidance in terms of how to apply to the technical assistance and what we mean with technical assistance. There was a suggestion to have a work in terms of mountains because there are works in terms of glacier retreat, desertification, so they want to see other ecosystems in terms of the work carrying out by the EXCOM. So it was suggested to have mountains. Also, it was a mention in terms of how to integrate loss and damage into the NDCs. Because the countries are including loss and damage, but there is no any kind of guidance in terms of how to do that. And the EXCOM is working in the BTR guideline, but not in terms of how to integrate loss and damage into the NDC. So they look forward to see this kind of guidance. And it was a recommendation also that perhaps it's not a guidance, but it's a recommendation that we need to standardize methodologies in terms of the UN, or if there is some kind of work that UN agencies are doing, how to standardize the work and support each other's, like in human rights and the EXCOM and other forums that are working on loss and damage. In terms of the second questions, like the single biggest gap in your country, ability to measure or document loss and damage, the main issue is the capacity. The countries don't have the capacity to measure the situation of loss and damage. It's really difficult to replicate case studies or to have case studies in their country, and also how to translate the realities of local actors in loss and damage beyond just generating data. But the biggest gap is also data, but we need to work also in terms of identify and building base of the local realities. And something that was mentioned that is part perhaps of the knowledge products and also in the biggest gap is how to create a link between loss and damage and compensation and reparation. I told them that this is a really political discussion, but it's something to bring it here also that is really important to mention. And the final question was in relation, how could WIM products and how to guides support your engagement with access to support available through the Santiago Network and the Loss and Damage Fund. And it was just one specific answer in terms of having how to translate loss and damage needs assessment into a solid bankable projects. So we need to identify what are the realities of the country, the needs of the country, and then identify the priorities to apply to those funds, like the funds and the Santiago network. So first we need data, information, capacities, and then how to translate this into bankable ideas and projects to the Santiago network and the Loss and Damage Fund. Thank you.
Great, thank you very much, Angela. Last group, if you could be very quick because we have to vacate the premises apparently.
Yes, thank you, and thanks to everyone who joined this station. So this is on informing the future how-to guides, and just to be very brief about it, the discussions really went into ensuring the practicality over the technicality of the how-tos. Make it user-friendly if there will be tools, make it interactive. It should be like the plug-and-play types of materials that will be usable to different types of audiences. There's also some of the examples would be adding some checklists, decision trees, specific and concrete country case studies, and in terms of the format, it can be something like there's a policy brief with technical annexes that would be, more tailored to the target technical people like academia, like partners, like government, so on and so forth. I'll just briefly mention others. There should be some templates that would help generate case studies, but should not be very limiting, like countries and other participants can still add more details into that. There's a preference to shorter materials, as I mentioned, maybe just like a policy brief and with the technical annexes. There should also be translations, at least to key languages, if that is possible. And then some of the topics that surfaced are what is not an LD, just to identify what's the limitation, specifically because there's such a thin line between adaptation and loss and damage. We've mentioned, they also mentioned that the current materials already incorporate the resources like the Santiago Network and the FRLD, but since the discussions are still ongoing on this, to make sure that we provide the latest information on criteria, on the process, on the template. And with the template, there should also be some sample proposals that can be serve as a better guide for all of the users. And then the last material would be a loss and damage 101, just to make sure that we will not jump into the technical modules as soon as possible, because there are times that they know basic L&D concepts only, and they want to further that knowledge before going into the how-tos, the other how-tos. So yeah, I think that's the wrap from Station
Great.
4.
Thank you very much, everybody. And thank you to all of you for your engagement in this little exercise. I'm sure it'll be very helpful in terms of how the WIM-XCOM moves forward with the next range of products. We only have 5 minutes left, and we have to sort of wrap up. So I just want to quickly ask if anyone has any sort of final reflections or comments or questions. If not, maybe I could also turn to Angela or James if you have any sort of final reflections from the XCOM side of things. I don't see any takers.
Yeah,
Angela,
perhaps
please. Yep.
just to say thank you so much for being here. My reflection is just to invite you to look at the webpage to familiarize with the work that we are doing. We see personally, since I joined the XCOM, I see the value of this body providing us some kind of technical support in terms of how to access to the methodology, the best available science, the existing information, and to take the advantage that we have a new body inside the XCOM, which is the Santiago Network for technical assistance, and also the financial arm, which is the Loss and Damage Fund. We are trying to do our best to create coherence between the three bodies, but we look forward that you also help us inside your countries to create the synergies between the three bodies, identifying knowledge gaps, applying for the technical assistance, and also to apply for resources in the Loss and Damage Fund. And we look forward to work with all of you in future stages. And thank you so much for being here and for joining us in this event.
Thank you very much, Angela. And final word to our XCOM member, James. Thanks.
Yes, thank you. Let me also take this opportunity to appreciate all of you for making time to attend this session and also giving us more of a contribution and what you think can work. And also this will help the EXCOM to continue improving on the knowledge products that they are going to produce. But also urging all the members, there is a common thing. When you see all the countries that have submitted their request to technical for SNLD or to the fund, there is one common thing. All their members who have submitted, they are very active in loss and damage negotiation, and also we are requesting, there is a nomination that was requested by the WIM EXCOM, the WIM, where you are supposed to nominate your national contact points for your country. Kindly ensure, because there is a continuous capacity building also under the Santiago network. They have requested the countries to nominate what we call the liaison officer. Kindly also ensure you have nominated the one for continuous capacity building, and also under the fund they have requested nomination of the focal points. Also ensure as your country have nominated and make it as a synergy and make it as work as one, because when you have three different entity, you'll have what we call conflicting of mandate within, who is supposed to do what within. So it's a good thing now to ensure that you all work. So we appreciate your time, but there is a common thing that we have already understand. We need to make this engagement continuous, and also we are requesting maybe the WIM to foresee maybe in the future to have what we call unpacking of these guidelines. So if we can have session to unpack this guideline and to make them user friendly, or to make them practical on how they can be applied in the actual sense. How can I utilize the guideline on mobility? How can I use the TFD one, the risk one on actual context? So we are looking for that session where we can unpack each to every member. So thank you all of you, and we appreciate for your time. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Angela, I understand you were going to respond to a question.
Yeah, I have a question in terms of how is WIM EXCOM integrating national contact points in development of the tools and products. Just to let you know that you have regional representatives from your governments attending the EXCOM as representatives. So I'm representing the Latin American region. My colleague from Kenya is representing the African region. So if you want to get access practically how countries are supporting the development of those products and how we are engaging with the EXCOM, you just need to go Google in the webpage and to see which are your representatives. We have representatives from all UN regions. So that's a good opportunity. And also you can involve in providing inputs to the guidelines and documents. If you want to bring a case study of your country that you consider that could be useful to replicate in other regions or countries, that is useful, and you can bring those ideas through your regional representation. Thank you so much.
Thank you very much, and thanks again for participating. That's time, so thank you all very much, and please enjoy the rest of your day. Thank you, everybody. And coffee outside as well if you need it.
How to